Beloved, your soulmate is asking you for one final conversation. But there is something different about this request. They are not saying, "Please hear me out because I need you back." They are not asking you to forget everything. They are not arriving with a dramatic promise that suddenly fixes years of confusion. Instead, your soulmate is preparing to tell you something that may actually make you angry before it makes anything better. Because there is one decision from your past they allowed you to misunderstand. For years. And beloved, your soulmate has finally admitted something to themselves that they were too ashamed to admit to you. They made a huge sacrifice for your relationship without ever telling you, and then quietly punished you for a sacrifice you never asked them to make. Beloved, that may explain more about your ending than either of you understood. And it began with one opportunity. Years ago, when your relationship was becoming serious, your soulmate was offered something enormous. Perhaps a position in another city. Maybe another country. A partnership. A major promotion. A place inside a family business they had been preparing for most of their life. Whatever it was, beloved, this was not a small opportunity. It came with more money, more status, a clearer future. Perhaps everything your soulmate had once said they wanted. Before you. And there was one complication. They would have to leave. Not someday. Soon. Maybe within 6 weeks. Your soulmate received the news and immediately thought of you. Not their salary. Not the title. Not what family would say. You. Perhaps they read the offer 3 times. Then looked at your name on their phone. They wanted to call. But they stopped. Why? Because your soulmate knew what would happen if they told you. You would ask, "What do you want?" And beloved, they were terrified of the answer. Part of them wanted the opportunity. Of course. It represented years of work. Perhaps family pride. Financial security. A life that made sense on paper. But another part looked at the possibility of moving far away and thought, "I don't want to build that life without them." Beloved, that realization frightened your soulmate. Because suddenly you were no longer simply somebody they loved. You were becoming part of how they evaluated their future. And your soulmate had never felt comfortable giving another person that much emotional importance. Perhaps they had watched somebody sacrifice everything for love and regret it. Maybe a parent. A sibling. Perhaps your soulmate had once promised themselves, "I will never give up my future for another person." Then you came into their life. Now their own rule was being tested. Perhaps your soulmate went to someone they trusted. A mentor. Friend. Sibling. They showed them the offer. The person was shocked. "You have to take this." Your soulmate did not respond. The friend noticed. What? Silence. Then, "It's them, isn't it?" Beloved, your soulmate perhaps became defensive. "This isn't about them." The friend looked at them. "It obviously is." Your soulmate replied, I just don't know if leaving is what I want anymore. The friend asked, have you told them? No, why not? And beloved, your soulmate gave the answer that created the whole problem. I don't want them to feel responsible. It sounded caring. Perhaps part of it was. Your soulmate did not want you hearing, I have this huge opportunity, but I'll stay if you ask me. That would place enormous pressure on you. Maybe you would say, take it. Even if you secretly wanted them near you. Or perhaps you would ask them to stay and spend years wondering whether you had damaged their career. Your soulmate wanted to avoid that. So they decided, I will make my own choice. Beloved, that part was correct. What happened afterward was not. Your soulmate turned the opportunity down. Quietly. Perhaps they wrote, thank you, but I've decided this isn't the right move for me at this time. Maybe their hands shook before they pressed send. The company called. Are you sure? Yes. Perhaps they offered more money. Your soulmate still said no. And beloved, they felt strangely relieved. Because they had chosen a life where you were still nearby. But they never told you. Not once. Perhaps that same evening, your soulmate came to see you. You noticed something different. What happened? They smiled. Nothing. Maybe you said, you look weird. They laughed. I'm fine. Beloved, you had no idea that only hours earlier, your soulmate had declined one of the biggest opportunities of their life partly because they did not want a future that took them away from you. Perhaps they looked at you that night and thought, this is worth it. Maybe you ate together. Talked. Laughed. And for a while, your soulmate truly believed the decision was easy. Then reality began. A month later, perhaps someone else received the position. Maybe your soulmate saw the announcement. Congratulations. Photos. New office. Exciting life. Something inside your soulmate tightened. They told themselves, I chose correctly. But beloved, regret can begin very quietly. It may not even sound like regret. Sometimes it sounds like irritation. Perhaps you complained about something small. Your soulmate reacted too strongly. Maybe you said, why are you talking to me like that? They replied, I'm stressed. Beloved, perhaps they were. But underneath the stress was an unspoken sentence, do you understand what I gave up? You could not understand. Nobody told you. Then family began asking questions. Whatever happened with that opportunity? Your soulmate avoided the subject. Maybe their father said, you turned that down. Their mother, why? Your soulmate answered, it wasn't right. Perhaps a sibling looked at them. Was this because of the relationship? Your soulmate snapped, no, beloved, why deny it? Because admitting the truth meant admitting they had allowed love to influence a major life decision. And your soulmate still carried shame around that. Perhaps family criticism grew. You'll regret it. You could have built something. Opportunities like that do not come twice. Beloved, your soulmate defended their decision outwardly. Inside, insecurity grew. What if they were right? And this is where something dangerous happened. Your soulmate began unconsciously looking at you for proof that the sacrifice had been worth it. But beloved, you did not know there had been a sacrifice. Maybe you were simply living normally. Perhaps you were still uncertain about the relationship too. Maybe you had your own career priorities. Perhaps you said, I don't know where I want to live long term. Your soulmate heard, I gave up my opportunity for someone who may leave anyway. Maybe you changed plans one weekend. Your soulmate became unusually cold. You asked, why are you so upset? I'm not. Beloved, they were. Not because of Saturday. Because somewhere inside, your soulmate felt, I rearranged my future around you and you don't even realize what this costs me. But beloved, whose fault was that? Not yours. They had intentionally kept you uninformed. Perhaps months passed. The hidden sacrifice began collecting emotional interest. Your soulmate started keeping score. Not consciously. But maybe when you focused on your career, they thought, I stayed. When you talked about travel, I stayed. When you became frustrated with the relationship, I stayed. Beloved, perhaps your soulmate began treating staying as proof that they loved more. Yet you had no idea what they were comparing. Maybe one argument captures everything. You told your soulmate, sometimes I feel like you don't actually choose this relationship. Beloved, your soulmate exploded. What are you talking about? You were shocked. They continued, you have no idea what I've done for this relationship. You asked, then tell me. Silence. There was their chance. Tell you. Tell you about the opportunity. Tell you about turning it down. Tell you how conflicted they had become. Instead, perhaps your soulmate said, forget it. Beloved. You became more frustrated. No. You can't throw that at me and then tell me to forget it. But your soulmate walked away. Why? Because perhaps saying, I gave up this opportunity for you, felt manipulative. And beloved, it would have been manipulative if used as debt. But the healthy alternative was not secrecy. It was honest context. I made a decision you didn't know about, and I'm realizing I have unresolved feelings about it. Your soulmate did not have that language yet. So the secret remained. Perhaps your relationship deteriorated. You felt your soulmate resented you. But you could not understand why. Sometimes they seemed deeply devoted. Other times they acted as though you were preventing them from living. Maybe one night you said, I feel like you blame me for something you refuse to name. Beloved. Your soulmate remembers. Because you were right. Perhaps they responded, that's ridiculous. You said, then why do I constantly feel like I owe you? Silence. Beloved, that question went straight through them. You did feel the invisible debt. Even without knowing the amount. Maybe whenever you wanted something different from your soulmate, They reacted like your desire was an additional demand after everything they had already given. Perhaps you wanted more commitment. Your soulmate thought, I already sacrificed my career. You wanted them to communicate better. They thought, what more do you want from me? Beloved, you were asking for relationship behavior. Your soulmate was comparing those requests to an invisible sacrifice. Two different conversations. Maybe eventually you became exhausted. You told them, I don't know why being loved by you feels like I'm being charged for something I never bought. Beloved, that sentence haunted your soulmate. Perhaps at the time they became angry. Now, they finally understand exactly what you meant. They had created a bill, then hidden the invoice. Eventually the relationship ended. Perhaps you were the one who left. Maybe your soulmate did. But beloved, after the breakup, something surprising happened. Your soulmate expected immediate relief. Now the sacrifice was no longer for you. Perhaps they could finally move. Take another opportunity. Build the career path they believed they had postponed. And maybe they did. Perhaps eventually they became successful. Maybe another major offer came. Your soulmate accepted. Their life continued. But beloved, resentment remained. For a long time, your soulmate told themselves a story, I gave up too much for that relationship. Perhaps when friends asked what happened, they said, I lost myself. Maybe that felt true. But beloved, they left out an important part. You never asked them to make the biggest sacrifice they blamed you for. You did not know. Maybe if they had told you about the opportunity, you would have said, take it. Perhaps that is what frightens your soulmate most now. Maybe you would have supported long distance. Maybe you could have moved later. Perhaps you would have found another solution. Or maybe you would have realized your futures did not fit. Painful, yes. But honest. Instead, your soulmate chose privately. Then made you emotionally responsible for the private choice. Years passed. Perhaps your soulmate became aware that something about their story did not feel fair. Maybe therapy. Maybe age. Maybe simply experiencing another relationship where someone made a major decision for them. Beloved, imagine. Perhaps a later partner gave up an opportunity without telling your soulmate. Months later, during an argument, that person said, I stayed because of you. Your soulmate froze. What? I turned something down because I thought we had a future. Your soulmate responded, I never asked you to do that. Silence. Beloved. The words left their mouth, and your face immediately appeared in their mind. I never asked you to do that. Suddenly your soulmate understood. Perhaps the other person said, but I did it because I loved you. Your soulmate replied, then why are you using it against me now? Beloved, there it was. Their own past. Reflected back. Maybe that relationship did not continue. Not important. What mattered was the realization. Your soulmate drove home that night and sat in their car. Perhaps remembered every argument with you. Every time you said, "Why do I feel like I owe you?" Every time they thought, "You have no idea what I sacrificed." Beloved, shame arrived. Not because staying had been wrong. They were allowed to decide an opportunity was not worth leaving for. The mistake was refusing to own that decision as theirs. Your soulmate had said no. Your soulmate had pressed send. Your soulmate had chosen. Love influenced the choice. But you did not control it. Beloved, perhaps for the first time your soulmate says aloud, "They didn't make me stay." Pause. I stayed. That one sentence changes everything. Maybe they cry. Because now another truth follows, and then I punish them for it. Beloved. There is the confession. Perhaps your soulmate starts reviewing the relationship without using sacrifice as moral superiority. You made mistakes too. Of course. Maybe you were impatient. Perhaps you said hurtful things. Maybe compatibility problems existed. The relationship was not secretly perfect. But beloved, this hidden resentment distorted everything. When you asked for more, they heard ingratitude. When you explored opportunities, they heard abandonment. When you said, "I need to know what you want," they thought, "Haven't I proven enough?" But you had never seen the proof. Perhaps your soulmate realizes another painful detail. Maybe you once received an opportunity yourself. Beloved, perhaps you told them immediately, "I got offered something." Your soulmate's reaction? Cold. You expected excitement. Instead, "So you're leaving?" You were confused. "I haven't decided." Your soulmate said, "Sounds like you already have." Beloved, perhaps you felt guilty for even being excited. You may have turned the opportunity down. Or perhaps accepted it after conflict. Either way, your soulmate's response came partly from their secret history. They thought, "I turned mine down for you. Will you turn yours down for me?" But they never asked that question honestly. Perhaps you would have said, "Why does loving you require one of us to lose?" Beloved. Exactly. Healthy partnership asks, can both lives expand? Can we negotiate? Can we support each other? Sometimes one person makes a sacrifice. Real relationships contain sacrifice. But sacrifice has to be chosen, discussed, and owned. Not secretly converted into leverage. Your soulmate sees that now. And perhaps that is why they want one last conversation. Not because the revelation makes them look romantic. Beloved, initially it may sound romantic. I gave up this huge opportunity because I loved you. But your soulmate now knows the darker truth. They allowed an act of love to become resentment. They weaponized something you never consented to. So when they finally message you, it reads, "Please hear me out one last time. There is something I blamed you for that was never yours to carry." Beloved, maybe you hesitate. The phrase, "one last time," makes you tired. How many final conversations can two people have? Perhaps you respond, "What is it?" Your soulmate asks for a call. Maybe you say, "Just tell me here." They respect it. Then comes the sentence, "Before we ended, I was offered a major opportunity somewhere else." You stare at the screen. You knew nothing. Your soulmate continues, "I turned it down." Perhaps you immediately wonder, "Why are you telling me now?" Then, "I turned it down partly because I wanted to stay near you." Beloved. Your first emotion may not be romance. It may be anger. You reply, "Why didn't you tell me?" Your soulmate answers, "Because I thought telling you would make you responsible for my decision." Perhaps you say, "And instead?" Beloved, your soulmate has to type the hardest sentence. Instead, I made you responsible without telling you. Silence. There. Maybe you read it twice. Your soulmate continues, "I started resenting you. I kept thinking about what I had given up. And every time you needed something from me, part of me thought you should already understand how much I had sacrificed." Beloved, perhaps you become furious. "How could I understand something you hid from me?" Your soulmate answers, "You couldn't." No defense. Perhaps you say, "So all those times you acted like I was selfish, yes. All those times you said I didn't appreciate you, yes. You were talking about this?" Partly. Beloved. Maybe the memories begin rearranging. The unexplained anger. Why career conversations triggered your soulmate. Why they reacted strangely when you spoke about moving. Why they sometimes acted as if your ambitions were betrayal. You finally see the missing piece. Perhaps you ask, "How big was the opportunity?" Your soulmate tells you. Maybe the amount. Position. Location. Whatever fits. You become silent. Then perhaps, would have told you to take it. Beloved. Your soulmate closes their eyes. There it is. The sentence they always feared. They answer, "I know that now." Perhaps you say, "You didn't know because you never asked." Yes. Then, "I think part of me didn't tell you because I was afraid you would say exactly that." Beloved. What? Now the truth gets deeper. Your soulmate did not only fear burdening you. They feared you would choose their future over keeping them close. If they said, "I got offered this amazing opportunity," maybe you would smile and say, "Go." And beloved, your soulmate wanted you to say, "Stay." But they were too afraid to ask, "Do you want me to stay?" So they privately answered the question for you. Then resented you for not expressing gratitude for the answer you never gave. Beloved, perhaps you write, "That is insane." Your soulmate replies, "I know." Maybe you are annoyed by that. No, I mean it. You wanted me to ask you to stay while making sure I never knew leaving was an option. Beloved. Exactly. Your soulmate says, "Yes. Perhaps, I was trying to avoid rejection." You answer, "And created resentment." Yes. Beloved. This may be one of the most honest conversations you have ever had. You ask, "Did you regret staying?" Your soulmate pauses. Important question. Then, sometimes. Beloved. Not romantic perfection. They continue, "But I don't think I regretted you." Pause. I regretted feeling like I no longer had a choice after I had already made one. That is psychologically important. Sometimes a voluntarily chosen sacrifice begins feeling like captivity when the person refuses to keep owning their decision. Your soulmate says, "I kept pretending the decision was still being made every day. Like every day I stayed with something you were taking from me." Beloved. Maybe you say, "That's exactly how it felt." Your soulmate asks, "What?" Like you were angry at me for existing in a life you had chosen. Silence. Beloved. Perhaps your soulmate starts crying. Because that is painfully accurate. They say, "I'm sorry." Maybe for once, there is nothing more sophisticated to say. You ask, "Why are you telling me now?" Beloved, here is the real test. If your soulmate says, "Because I want you back," then the confession becomes transactional. Instead, "Because I finally realized you may still think you were difficult to love." Pause. And I helped create that. Beloved. Perhaps that lands. Your soulmate continues, "I made normal needs look excessive because I was secretly comparing them to something you didn't know I'd given up." You may have spent years believing you asked too much. Then, you didn't ask for that sacrifice. Beloved. Maybe you have indeed carried that. Perhaps after the relationship, you told yourself, "I am too demanding. I ruin people's lives. Maybe I expect someone to center me." Your soulmate says, "I want you to know that part was mine." Beloved. This is not, "Everything was my fault." No. It is ownership of one specific pattern. Maybe you ask, "So what am I supposed to do with this information?" Your soulmate answers, "Whatever you want." Then, I'm not asking you to comfort me. I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I'm not asking you to say we would have worked if I had told you. Beloved. Good. Perhaps, I just don't want you carrying a debt that was never yours. Maybe you become quiet. Then ask, "Do you still think about what would have happened if you took the offer?" Your soulmate answers honestly. Yes. Beloved, perhaps that hurts. Then they continue, "But I don't think about it as the life you stole from me anymore." Pause. It was a life I decided not to choose. There. Perhaps you say, "And do you blame yourself?" Your soulmate thinks. Sometimes. Then, "But I'm trying not to. Maybe, I made the best decision I could with who I was. And then I handled the emotions around it badly." Beloved. Healthy accountability. Not eternal self-hatred. You perhaps ask, "Would you make the same decision now?" Interesting. Your soulmate says, "Not the same way." What does that mean? I would tell you. Beloved. Then, would say, I have this opportunity. I also want us. Can we talk honestly about what both futures would require? Exactly. Maybe, if I decided to stay, I would own that. And if resentment came later, I would tell you before it became your personality in my mind. Beloved. Powerful. Maybe you smile sadly. That would have helped. I know. Perhaps you tell them, I always thought you hated how ambitious I was. Your soulmate becomes surprised. No, you acted like it. Then they understand. Every time you pursued something, it activated the abandoned opportunity. They became cold. You interpreted, my success threatens them. Partly. But the root was, your freedom reminded them of the freedom they had voluntarily surrendered. Beloved, your soulmate says, I think your ambition reminded me that I hadn't made peace with my own choice. Maybe you nod. That makes more sense. Not excusing. Explaining. Perhaps another painful memory surfaces. You once said, I got an interview. Your soulmate barely reacted. You were crushed. They now remember. Perhaps they say, I'm sorry about that too. You ask, what? I should have celebrated you. Beloved. Then, I made your opportunity about my old one. Maybe you become emotional. That moment had stayed with you. Perhaps you thought your soulmate never truly wanted you to succeed. Now the truth is more complicated. They loved you. Your growth triggered their unresolved grief. Still, you deserved better behavior. Beloved, perhaps you tell them, you could have been sad about your life and happy for mine at the same time. Your soulmate says, yes. There. Maturity is often the ability to hold two truths at once. Perhaps the conversation lasts hours. At the end, your soulmate says, there's one more thing. You almost laugh. Of course there is. Maybe both smile. Then your soulmate becomes serious. I used to think staying was proof I loved you more. Beloved. And now? Now I think telling you the truth would have been more loving than silently staying. There it is. Because grand sacrifice feels romantic. But real intimacy often looks far less cinematic. It looks like, I received an offer. I want you. I also want this. I'm scared. Can we talk? Beloved, perhaps if that conversation had happened, the relationship would still have ended. But both of you would have been deciding from reality. Not invisible sacrifice. Not hidden resentment. Perhaps you ask, why, one last time? Your soulmate becomes quiet. Maybe you assumed this was another attempt to pull you back. They say, because I don't want apologies to become another way of keeping myself in your life. Beloved. That surprises you. They continue, I've told myself before that I just need to explain one more thing. One more message. One more conversation. Then, at some point, respecting you means letting the explanation end. Powerful. Perhaps, if you want to speak again after this, I'm here. But I'm not going to manufacture unfinished business, so I always have a reason to return. Beloved. That is a very different one last time. Maybe you ask, do you want to return? Your soulmate does not pretend. Yes. Then, but wanting something doesn't automatically give me access to it. Beloved. Perhaps you look at the screen. Maybe your heart softens. Maybe not. Both are allowed. Your soulmate continues, if you ever wanted to know me again, would come into that honestly. I wouldn't ask for friendship while secretly waiting for romance. I wouldn't expect you to fix my regret. And I wouldn't make some new sacrifice without discussing it and then expect you to repay me with loyalty. Beloved. There is evidence they learned the actual lesson. Perhaps you say, I don't know what I want. Your soulmate responds, you don't have to know tonight. No countdown. No pressure. Maybe you say, I do still care. Beloved, your soulmate feels it. But they do not jump. You add, that doesn't mean I'm ready. I understand. This time perhaps they do. Maybe the conversation ends peacefully. And beloved, what happens next matters more than the confession. Does your soulmate truly leave space? Perhaps yes. A week. Maybe longer. No hidden pressure. Then perhaps you reach out. Not because you feel guilty. Because curiosity remains. You ask, did you ever take another opportunity like that? Your soulmate smiles at the message. Yes. Maybe years later they did. You ask, were you happy? Sometimes. Then, I learned something. What? Beloved, your soulmate replies, there is no life where every road not taken stops existing. Powerful. Whatever you choose, there will always be another path. Marriage means saying no to some forms of independence. Career sometimes means less time. Parenthood changes things. Moving closes one door and opens another. Beloved, maturity is not finding the choice with zero loss. It is deciding what loss you can own without making someone else your villain. Perhaps this is what your soulmate finally understands. Maybe you slowly speak again. Months pass. A real test arrives. Your soulmate receives another major opportunity. Beloved. Same pattern. Different people now. Perhaps the offer requires travel. A temporary move. Something that affects a possible relationship with you. This time, they call. I need to tell you something before my brain turns it into a private crisis. You almost laugh. What happened? They tell you about the offer. Everything. You listen. Then ask, what do you want? Beloved, the old question. Your soulmate breathes. I want the opportunity. Perhaps your heart drops slightly. Then, and I want to keep building with you. There. Both truths. Maybe you ask, can those things coexist? Your soulmate answers, I don't know yet. Then, can we figure that out together before either of us decides what the other person should sacrifice? Beloved. That is transformation. Perhaps you talk. Maybe it means distance for 6 months. Maybe visits. Maybe the opportunity is not practical. Maybe your soulmate eventually turns it down again. But if they do, they say, this is my decision. And later, during an argument, they do not say, I gave this up for you. Because, beloved, they are learning, a freely chosen sacrifice is not alone. If a decision becomes unbearable, reopen the decision. Do not silently convert love into debt. Perhaps this time, you actually encourage them to take it. You should go. Your soulmate feels the old fear. Does that mean you do not love them enough to ask them to stay? They catch the thought. Ask, can I tell you what my insecure brain just heard? You smile. Yes. It heard, I don't care whether you leave. Beloved. You answer, that isn't what I said. What did you mean? I mean I don't want you shrinking your life to prove you love me. Pause. We can miss each other and still choose each other. Beloved. Your soulmate becomes emotional. Because years ago, they believed the only two choices were, opportunity. Or you. Now, maybe there are more options. Sometimes mature love is not choosing one person instead of a future. It is finding out whether the two futures can communicate. Perhaps that is the life lesson your soulmate needed. And maybe this relationship works now. Maybe it does not. But beloved, if it does, one thing changes forever: no invisible sacrifices. If your soulmate gives something up that materially affects your shared life, you know. If you sacrifice something, they know. Not so either person can keep score. So both people can make informed decisions. Perhaps you eventually tell your soulmate, I never needed you to prove you loved me by losing something. They respond, I know. Then smile. Sorry. You laugh. Perhaps they say, what I wanted back then was for you to understand how serious I was. You answer, then you should have told me. Beloved. So simple now. Your soulmate nods. I know. Perhaps this time you let them say it. Because they really do. Beloved, this is what your soulmate wanted you to hear one last time. The surprising truth was not merely, I gave up a huge opportunity because I loved you. That would be too easy. Too romantic. The harder truth? I gave something up without trusting you enough to discuss it, and then I made you emotionally pay for my decision. That is the confession. They do not want applause for the sacrifice. They want responsibility for the resentment. Perhaps your soulmate's final words to you are, I need you to know you did not ruin my future. Beloved. Maybe you did not realize how much you needed to hear that. They continue, you did not force me to stay. I chose. I became afraid of what I had chosen. And instead of admitting that fear, I made you feel like you were taking something from me. Pause. You weren't. Beloved. Perhaps tears. Then, I'm sorry I loved you like my choices were your debts. There. Maybe the strongest apology your soulmate has ever given. They continue, if this is the final conversation we ever have, I want you to leave it knowing that you were not too demanding because you asked for communication. You were not selfish because you still had dreams. You did not owe me a lifetime because I quietly changed one part of mine. Beloved. And then, I thought sacrifice made my love deeper. Pause. Now I understand honesty would have made it safer. That is the surprise. Perhaps your soulmate once believed the greatest proof of devotion was everything they were willing to lose. Now they know something more mature. Love is not about secretly losing as much as possible. It is about building a life where two people can tell the truth about what each choice costs. Where nobody has to become small to make the other feel chosen. Where compromise exists without hidden accounting. Where sacrifice may happen, but never becomes a weapon years later. And beloved, if your soulmate ever stands in front of you again asking for another chance, watch for this. Do they tell you what they need before resentment? Can they support your success without turning it into evidence you love them less? Can they make decisions and own them? Can they say, I chose this, instead of, look what you made me give up? Because that will tell you far more than the confession. Perhaps your soulmate ends the conversation with one final sentence, I spent years saying I lost myself because I loved you. A pause. Then, the truth is, I lost myself whenever I made a choice and refused to admit it was mine. Beloved, that is what they finally understand. And perhaps it is why they are not asking you to save them now. They are not asking you to return the opportunity. The years. The alternate life. None of that can be returned. They are asking only that you hear the truth. One last time. Because if there is never another conversation, they do not want you walking into the rest of your life believing you destroyed theirs. And if there is another chapter? This time your soulmate wants to enter it with empty hands. No hidden invoice. No secret sacrifice. No emotional debt. Just one clear question, do the people we are now want to choose each other freely? And beloved, for perhaps the first time in your entire connection, your soulmate is finally ready for your answer, without deciding in advance what you owe them.